The bootstrap.js file that you can find in the scripts folder of a new MVC project includes about a dozen or so jQuery plugins that produce highly interactive components on the screen. For example, there's a picture carousel that you can load up with images, and the picture carousel will rotate through those images, also allow a user to click around and pause the slideshow. You can go to the Bootstrap website to see the full list of components and jQuery plugins, but one I've had a lot of success with is the modal. So the modal is something where you typically write a little bit of JavaScript to interact with the modal. Not all of these jQuery plugins actually require you to write JavaScript. Some of them are just programmed with data dash attributes. But with the modal, typically you want to respond to some button click event. So you will hook up to a button click event with jQuery, and when the user clicks a button, you'll want to show some modal dialog and confirm that they really want to save something or that they really want to delete something. And then that dialog can have a save changes button and a close button. And it turns out that this is relatively easy to work with. First of all, here at the top of the page, I still have a div with a button inside. The ID of that button is show modal. So I've also included some jQuery code that will wire up the DOM ready event. It's inside of the scripts section of this index page. So the scripts section, of course, gets rendered into the layout view when it says render section scripts. So the script will appear at the bottom of the page. Typically, you'd want to take this code and put it into a separate JS file, but I just have it here so we can put everything on the screen at one time. What the code is doing when the DOM is ready is wiring up a click event to that button. When the user clicks on it, we'll go out and find the element with an ID of the modal, and then we'll tell it to show. Notice that this API is a lot like jQuery UI when you interact with widgets. Essentially, you have to call the method that is the gateway to that widget, which in this case is modal, and then the method that you want to call on that particular widget is the show method. jQuery plugins commonly do this so it preserves the chainability of the jQuery methods, because if we just did .modal.show, it's sometimes hard for some of these methods like show to actually return the wrapped set that jQuery is managing. So a lot of the plugins, it's a little bit awkward, but you invoke a method on that particular widget by passing the name as a string. I want this modal to show itself. So what is the modal? That is a div with a class of modal. You can also add exit and entry effects to some of these components. So this one should fade in and fade out. And the modal, just like some of the more complex components that we looked at, like the nav bar, requires some well-structured HTML. Inside the div with the class of modal, I need a div with the class of modal dialog. A modal dialog is going to contain a div with modal content, and the content consists of the header, the body, and the footer. The header obviously at the top of the dialog. It's usually in some sort of colored title bar. Then there's the body that will contain the content you want to display, perhaps some text, perhaps some images, something that the user should read. And then the footer is where you commonly put the buttons that will close the dialog, or something a user can click on to save changes or otherwise dismiss the dialog. And again, the body is just whatever content you want to put in here, whatever you want to display. And the header itself in this case is just a button that will dismiss the dialog and a header that displays hello. So again, the way that looked when we put it all together was like this. The two buttons in the footer, the content area, and the header with the button I can click to dismiss and cancel that dialog.